The thing about New Year's resolutions is, most people don't make them because they want to. They make them because they're trying to outrun something. For me, it wasn't a gym membership or cutting out sugar or reading a book a week. My resolution was simple. Stop being a coward. Specifically, stop being a coward about the barista at Voltage Coffee. His name was Cam. That much I knew. I knew a few other things, too, like that he always wore black jeans rolled at the ankle. His hair was this soft, almost too perfect mess of dark curls, and that he had a tattoo of a tiny fox on his forearm. I also knew he made the best flat white in town, smiled with his whole face, and occasionally added a second espresso shot to my cup without charging me. What I didn't know was if he was into guys, or me, or anything that would justify the dumb little crush I'd been nursing for 11 months and 27 days. Which brings us to New Year's Day. It was raining. Not pouring, just that constant gray drizzle Seattle's known for. I was at my kitchen table, still in sweats, eating dry cereal from the box when I opened my notes app and typed it out. Resolution number 1, ask Cam out. Then I sat there and stared at it like I just carved it into stone. It didn't even feel real until a few days later, when the calendar flipped to January 3rd and I found myself outside the coffee shop, my fingers numb from the cold, staring at the front door like it was a challenge I hadn't trained for. The line wasn't long. That was the first sign the universe was messing with me. The second sign was Cam being the one behind the counter. He saw me instantly. "Hey," he said, his smile blooming like it always did. "Missed you. Been hibernating for the holidays?" Something about the way he said "missed you" made my chest tighten. I managed a casual shrug. "Family stuff. You know how it goes." "Well, I'm glad you survived," he said, turning to the espresso machine. "Your usual?" "Yeah. And, My throat dried up halfway through. This was it. This was supposed to be the moment. But instead of asking him out, I said, "Actually, make it a double." He glanced over his shoulder with a grin. "Ooh. A bold start to the year." "Trying to match the vibe," I said, which didn't even make sense, but he chuckled anyway. As he worked the machine, I watched his hands. Steady, sure. I wondered how many lattes he made a day. If he ever noticed the regulars the way I noticed him. If he had any idea. I had once Googled how to tell if your barista is flirting or just being paid to be nice. When he slid the cup toward me, our fingers didn't touch, but they got close. "Happy New Year," he said. "For real." "Yeah," I said, holding his gaze. "You too." I didn't ask him out that day. I told myself I needed a better moment. Less crowded, less pressure. But mostly, I just chickened out. It became a pattern. Every other morning, I'd show up. He'd greet me by name, ask how work was going, tell me about a new band he was into, or a weird customer story. And I'd smile and nod and leave without saying anything that mattered. Until one Friday morning, halfway through January, when everything changed. I walked in to find Cam wasn't there. My stomach dropped in this stupid, irrational way, like I'd missed an exit. I ordered from some other guy the first didn't recognize, grabbed my drink, and sat by the window, pretending to scroll my phone while debating whether to finally give up. Then the bell above the door jingled. I looked up, and there he was. Jacket damp from the rain, curls a little flatter than usual, but still him. Cam. He saw me before I could look away. "Hey," he said, walking straight over. "I was hoping I'd catch you." My pulse jumped. "Everything okay?" He nodded, unzipping his jacket. "Yeah, just running late. Had to bike in, forgot my headphones, and now I've got Taylor Swift stuck in my head. And not even a good era," I laughed. "Which era's the bad one?" He opened his mouth like he was about to answer, then stopped. "Actually," he said, "can I ask you something?" My heart stuttered. "Sure." Cam rubbed the back of his neck, eyes flicking to the side like he was trying to line up the right words. "This is gonna sound weird, but have you been working up to asking me out for, 3 weeks?" I froze. What?" "I'm not trying to be cocky," he said quickly, "but I've seen the look. The long pauses. The extra shot. Code. And if I'm wrong, tell me and I'll go dive into the nearest sewer out of shame." I couldn't speak. Cam took a breath. Because if you were, I was kind of waiting for you to do it. And I figured if you didn't by the end of the week, I was gonna beat you to it. I blinked. That was your resolution? He grinned. Yep, resolution number 1. If the cute guy with the anxious coffee order doesn't make a move by January 20th, I will. My mouth hung open for a second before I laughed, loud and maybe a little relieved. You planned this? He shrugged, biting back a smile. I like to be prepared. You planned this? I asked again, still stunned. Cam leaned against the side of my table, arms crossed casually like this wasn't the single most surreal moment of my adult life. I mean, kind of. I had a whole window of time where I thought maybe you were going to ask me out. But then you just sort of deflate. I groaned and dropped my face into my hands. God, was I that obvious? Not obvious, he said. Just endearingly awkward. I peeked through my fingers. So you don't think I'm a complete idiot? Not at all. Just a guy who overthinks. Guilty. I sat up straighter, trying to reset the whole vibe in my head, but my heart was still racing. Cam was standing in front of me, casually dismantling the emotional knot I'd been carrying for months and smiling like it was no big deal. You really were going to ask me out? I said. Like, for real? He tilted his head. Yeah. I had this whole idea. I was gonna write it on your cup. I blinked. Like, hey, wanna go out sometime instead of my name? Well, no. First I was gonna write, are you ever gonna ask me out? But then I thought that was kind of aggressive. So I went with plan B, which was, just ask you when you look the most caffeinated and least likely to faint, I laughed. That's very considerate. I try. We stood there for a moment, not talking, just grinning at each other like two people who suddenly had permission to stop pretending. So, Cam said finally, nodding toward my still warm coffee, are you doing anything tonight? Because I have an actual night off. I was gonna spend it rewatching old episodes of Broad City and eating Thai food, but I'd rather do that with you. I opened my mouth to say yes immediately, but then stopped. Wait, I said, raising a finger. Are you asking me out before I officially ask you out? Cam's grin widened. Maybe. Why? Because my New Year's resolution was to ask you out. He nodded slowly, theatrically. All right, then ask me out. I'll act surprised. I took a breath, grinning like a moron. Cam, would you like to get dinner with me tonight? His eyebrows went up. Wow, I didn't see that coming. I swatted at him, and he ducked with a laugh. Is that a yes? I asked. It's a hell yes. He pulled a pen from behind his ear and grabbed a fresh cup from the stack on the counter, writing something on it before sliding it toward me. I flipped it around and read the words. Tonight, 7 p.m., Thai Palace. Dress code, chill AF. Winking face. You even picked the place? I said. Like I said, he replied, stepping back behind the counter as the next customer walked in. I like to be prepared. I held up the cup. So what, I just show up? Exactly, he said, eyes twinkling. And you better not chicken out this time. The rest of the day was a blur. I tried to work, but my brain was shot. Every time I looked at the clock, it had barely moved. I cleaned my apartment for no reason, changed outfits 3 times, Googled, how casual is casual dinner on a first date? I landed on dark jeans, clean sneakers, and a navy sweater that didn't scream trying too hard. By the time I got to Thai Palace, Cam was already there, waiting outside under the awning. He looked so different in street clothes, less curated, more natural, still absolutely him. You showed, he said. You doubted me? He shrugged. A little. We got a booth near the back and talked like we'd done it 100 times before. Everything just clicked. It wasn't butterflies. It was something steadier, a kind of rightness I didn't expect. I feel like I've known you longer than I have, I said at one point, halfway through a plate of drunken noodles. Cam smiled. You've known me for 11 months and 27 days. I stared. How do you know that? He shrugged. That was the first time you came in. You had a horrible cold, and you asked if I could make your latte with honey instead of sugar. I'd never had anyone ask for that before. That's terrifyingly specific. I remember the good ones. Something about the way he said it made me stop breathing for a second. You really thought I was going to ask you out? I asked. He nodded. I hoped you would. I sipped my drink. What would you have done if I hadn't? He leaned closer. I told you. I had a plan. I tilted my head, smiling behind the rim of my glass. Okay, I'll bite. What was your plan? Cam leaned back in the booth, arms stretched out on either side like he had all the time in the world. Well, he said, step one was wait, give you enough space to make the first move, in case you were just nervous or shy. Generous, I said. He nodded. Step two was flirt more obviously. I figured if you didn't respond, at least I'd know you weren't interested. I laughed. Wait, more obviously? What part of free espresso and remembering my allergies wasn't already full-blown romantic? Hey, maybe I'm just an excellent barista, he said, mock offended. Don't discredit the customer service game. I rolled my eyes, still grinning. And step three? I asked. Cam glanced down at the table, then back at me with a small smile. If all else failed, I was going to ask you out on Valentine's Day. Just go full cliché. I stared at him. Seriously? Yep, he said. Thought if I waited long enough, the universe would either hand me a sign or I'd finally grow the balls to do it. That's actually kind of romantic. Cam shrugged like it wasn't a big deal, but his foot bumped mine under the table, and neither of us moved away. I guess it was easier than wondering, he said. You kept showing up. I figured there was something there. There was, I said quietly. Cam's smile softened. Good. The rest of the meal felt lighter, like something had finally unlocked between us. We talked about music, bad exes, what it was like growing up here. He told me about his first tattoo, done in his friend's garage with a needle he now deeply regrets, and how he almost moved to LA last year before changing his mind the week before his lease ended. I think I stayed because of the coffee shop, he said, and maybe someone in it. That hit me in a place I didn't know was still so raw. I can't believe we wasted 11 months just smiling at each other across the counter, I said. Cam smiled. You think this is wasted? No, I said. I think it was warm-up. After dinner, we walked out into the chilly air, our breath visible in the glow of the street lamps. Cam's hands were stuffed in his jacket pockets, but he kept brushing his shoulder against mine like he couldn't help it. We stopped at the corner before splitting off, my apartment in one direction, his in the other. So, he said, rocking on his heels, this was good. Yeah, I said. It really was. Cam nodded, then looked up at me through his lashes. Do I get to see you again? I reached up, my hand grazing the back of his neck, tentative but steady. You better, I said. I've got 11 months of missed opportunities to make up for. He smiled and leaned in, slower than necessary, giving me plenty of time to back off. I didn't. His lips were warm, soft, familiar, in a way that made no sense and all the sense in the world. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't fireworks. It was better, it was easy. When we finally pulled apart, Cam kept his forehead resting against mine. So much for Valentine's Day, he murmured. I laughed. Screw the calendar, we're rewriting the timeline. He kissed me again, quick this time, and stepped back. Text me when you get home, he said. Yeah, I said. You too. And just like that, he turned and walked off into the night, shoulders hunched against the cold, leaving me standing there like some lovesick idiot in the best way possible. My phone buzzed before I'd even made it halfway down the block. Cam. Next resolution. Breakfast? My place. No espresso machine, but I make killer pancakes. I didn't even hesitate. Me. I'm in. Hope you like overthinkers with crushes and zero chill. Cam. Perfect. Hope you like guys who plan everything just to act surprised when it works out. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was anxious or overthinking for once, but because I was wired in the best way, like something had cracked open in me and let all the light in at once. I kept replaying everything, from the look on Cam's face when I walked into the shop, to the way his voice dipped when he asked if I had been planning to ask him out. And that kiss, that quiet, careful kiss on the corner of Pine and 8th, like we were the only ones in the world, and we both knew it. By the time morning rolled around, I was out of bed early, showered, dressed, and standing in front of my closet with a dumb internal debate about whether pancakes at a barista's apartment qualified as a date or just breakfast with a new vibe. I landed on casual, sweater, decent jeans, clean sneakers, low-key but not lazy, presentable but not like I'd spent half an hour deciding. I even bought a bag of those fancy oranges with the dark red flesh and a half dozen croissants from the French bakery by my place. Felt like the kind of thing people brought when they were dating someone. Or maybe wanted to. Cam's place was only about a 10-minute walk from mine, tucked above a vintage bookstore on a side street I'd passed 100 times without noticing. I buzzed his apartment and heard the muffled sound of feet on old wood floors before the door creaked open. "Hey," he said, hair tousled, hoodie slightly askew like he'd pulled it on over pajamas. "Wow, you're early. Or punctual. I don't know. Time's fake." "You said pancakes," I said, holding up the pastry bag and fruit. I was motivated. Cam laughed and stepped aside to let me in. His place was small, but full of charm. Plants everywhere, shelves crammed with books and random mugs, a lopsided Polaroid of him and a friend stuck to the fridge with a cat magnet. The kitchen smelled like maple syrup and browning butter, and I swear I could feel my whole body relax just standing in the doorway. "You live above a bookstore?" I asked. He nodded. "Rent's cheap and the smell of old paper is basically free therapy." I handed over the croissants. "You win the indie rom-com lifestyle." Cam arched a brow. "Rom-com, huh?" I shrugged. "What else would you call this?" He smirked, setting the bag down and moving to flip a pancake on the skillet. "Okay, but who's the quirky one with the tragic backstory and the guarded heart?" "Depends on who's asking," I said, and it earned me a grin that made my knees feel weirdly unsteady. We ate on the couch, his coffee table covered in an old fleece blanket to make it feel less like a hand-me-down from Craigslist, and talked more than we ate. Cam told me about how he started working at the cafe after a semester of architecture school nearly broke him. I told him about my tech job that I mostly liked but didn't love. We talked about worst first dates, weird dreams, our mutual obsession with iced coffee even in winter. And when we were done eating, we didn't move right away. Just sat there, legs barely touching, the space between us warm and humming with something unspoken. Cam looked over. "I was serious, you know, about waiting for you to ask." "I know," I said quietly. "I mean, I get that it's scary," he added. "You didn't know if I was into guys or taken or just flirting because I'm being paid hourly." That last one did cross my mind more than once. He laughed and nudged my leg with his. "Fair, but I meant it. I was into you." "Was?" I teased. He rolled his eyes, but his smile didn't fade. Obviously." There was a pause. Then I reached out and slid my fingers through his, slow and careful, like testing the weight of something new. Cam looked down at our hands, then back up at me. "So what now?" I gave his hand a light squeeze. "Now I don't let another 11 months go by." "Good," he said, leaning in until our foreheads touched. "Because I already penciled you into my calendar." Over the next few weeks, Cam and I settled into this new rhythm that felt both unfamiliar and completely natural. We still saw each other at the coffee shop, me in line like always, him behind the counter doing his usual magic, but now there was something extra in every exchange. It wasn't just the flirtation, which had cranked up to about an 11. It was the way we looked at each other, like we knew a secret no one else in the room did. "Didn't recognize you without your hoodie?" I teased one morning, seeing him in a collared flannel. Cam winked, trying to impress this regular who never tips. "I tip. You tip in compliments and long stares." "Is it working?" "Oh yeah," he said, sliding my latte across the counter. "Big time." We started spending nights together too. Nothing heavy, just easy, warm things. Movies on his couch, late night walks, cooking dinner at my place. We hadn't had the talk yet, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to label it so soon. But whatever it was, it felt good. It felt right. One night we were sprawled out on my floor, our legs tangled, a vinyl playing something soft and folky in the background. I don't even remember what we were talking about, just that I looked over at him mid-sentence and caught him watching me. "What?" I asked. He shook his head, like he wasn't sure if he should say it. Then, "I like who I am when I'm around you." That floored me, not just because it was sweet, but because it was real, unfiltered. Cam wasn't the kind of guy to throw words around just to hear himself talk. When he said something like that, he meant it. "I like who you are when you're around me too," I said. "Mostly because you bring snacks." He laughed and threw a pillow at my face. After that, things deepened. We weren't just playing house anymore. He started leaving things at my place. An extra hoodie, a toothbrush, a box of his weird herbal tea that I pretended not to like but secretly drank when he wasn't around. We still hadn't used the word boyfriend, but I noticed how his name started showing up in my stories when I talked to friends. I noticed how easily I reached for his hand in public without thinking twice. I noticed that when I was having a shitty day, the first person I wanted to see was him. By mid-February, we'd fallen into something steady. And that scared me a little. Not in the run for the hills way. Just in that quiet, vulnerable way where you realize you're not just casually into someone, you're actually invested. Like, if this ended, it would hurt. A lot. Cam noticed it one night, when I got quiet during dinner. "You good?" he asked, poking at his stir-fry. I nodded, then shook my head. "Yeah. I mean, kind of." He set his chopsticks down and gave me his full attention. "Talk to me." "I'm just not used to this," I said. "Being this happy." Cam leaned in, resting his arms on the table. "Does it scare you?" "Yeah," I admitted. He nodded like he understood. "It scares me too." That surprised me. Cam always seemed so sure of himself, so unfazed. "But it's the good kind of scared," he added. "The kind where you know it's real." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I reached across the table, palm up. He took it without hesitation. By the time March rolled in, Cam and I had become the kind of thing I used to envy in other couples. We had routines now. Monday night was burrito night. Wednesdays, I'd bring him a hot tea on his break if the weather sucked. He'd sneak me a new coffee blend to try on Sundays, always scribbled with some dorky note like, "Tastes like regret and warm hugs," or "pairs well with cuddles." It was so domestic, so easy, that sometimes I'd catch myself wondering when the other shoe would drop. But it never did. Instead, something else happened. One Saturday afternoon, Cam showed up at my apartment with a beat-up shoebox and a weird look on his face. "I need to show you something," he said, stepping inside and kicking off his sneakers. "Okay," I said, cautious. "Is that a euphemism? Or—" He gave me a look. "Calm down." I snorted. "That's a relief." He sat on my couch and opened the box, pulling out a stack of old sketchbooks, each one a little more worn than the last. "Wait," I said. "You draw?" He nodded, but didn't look up. "Used to. A lot." He flipped open the top sketchbook and held it out to me. Inside were dozens of small, detailed sketches. City streets, coffee shop interiors, hands holding cups, backs of heads, little candid moments. "These are really good," I said, flipping through. "Like, really good. Why haven't you shown me these before?" Cam gave a half shrug. Stopped after I dropped out. Didn't feel like there was a point. I looked up at him. "Cam, these are incredible. Why would you stop?" He hesitated. "Because I felt like I wasn't good enough. And drawing just made me feel worse about not doing anything with it." I paused. "You are doing something with it. You're living. You're making things. That counts." He didn't say anything for a second, just watched me flip to another page. Then he pulled out a more recent sketchbook, smaller, spiral-bound, a little less beat up, and handed it over. I opened it. The first page was me, sitting in the corner of the coffee shop, head down, hoodie on, latte in hand, totally unguarded, the way only someone who'd really been paying attention would have captured. I flipped again. Another sketch. Me laughing. Another reading. Another half asleep with my head tilted back against the couch. "They're all me," I said, stunned. Cam rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, I guess I've been drawing you for a while." "Since when?" "Since, like, month 2? You had this whole sad boy energy, but in a way that made me want to know what made you smile." I looked back down at the pages. "These are beautiful." He was watching me now, eyes soft. "So are you." I laughed under my breath. "Jesus, you just gonna keep blindsiding me like this?" "That's the plan," he said. "Also, you're the reason I started drawing again. Thought you should know." That hit me in the gut, more than I expected. It was one thing to fall for someone. It was another to realize you'd been quietly inspiring them without knowing it. "I've never had someone look at me like this," I said, flipping to another sketch. "Like they see all of me." Cam shifted closer on the couch. "Well, get used to it." April brought longer days, lighter jackets, and this weird, blissed-out version of my life I still couldn't quite believe was real. Cam and I were officially us now. No more side glances, no more what-ifs. He started calling me his boyfriend in front of friends, casually, like it was the most natural word in the world. And every time he did, I felt something in my chest settle, like my name finally had a home inside his mouth. One night, we went to a friend's birthday party, a rooftop thing with string lights, cheap beer, and way too many people trying to look effortlessly cool. We stuck to the corner, watching the city blink to life around us. Cam leaned against the railing, hands in his pockets. "Do you ever feel like the city changes with the seasons?" I nodded. "Yeah. Like in winter, it's all angles and gray. And springs when you start seeing people again." He looked over. "You came back to life a little too." I gave him a sideways glance. "You think?" "Definitely," he said. "First day you walked in after New Year's, I could tell something had shifted." "I had a plan," I said. "You were the plan." He smiled at that, quiet and genuine. "You were mine too." Later that night, after too much cake and too many failed attempts at group photos, we ended up back at his place. It was raining just enough to make the window streak. We stripped off our damp jackets, kicked off our shoes, and collapsed into the couch like we'd both been holding our breath all evening. "You ever think about how weird it is we didn't do this sooner?" I asked, tugging the throw blanket over our legs. Cam, half asleep already, murmured, "Maybe we needed the slow burn." "I mean, yeah," I said, "but I feel like I could have skipped a lot of anxiety if I'd just opened my mouth." He laughed sleepily. "I don't know. You were cute when you were flustered." "I still am flustered. You just don't notice anymore." "I notice," he whispered, curling into my side. "I just don't mind it now." We fell asleep on the couch like that. Legs tangled, bodies warm under the blanket, the quiet hum of the city filling the room. The next morning, I woke up before him. Cam's head was on my chest, his arm draped across my stomach, hair messily falling across his forehead. He looked peaceful, uncomplicated. I stayed like that, barely breathing, memorizing the weight of him, the shape of his breath, the way his fingers twitched in sleep. It hit me then. How much had changed? That resolution I made on January 1st? It wasn't about courage. Not really. It was about choosing to believe that something good could actually happen. That taking a risk on someone, on myself, might lead to something worth keeping. Cam stirred beside me, groaned softly, and opened one eye. "You watching me sleep, creep?" I grinned. "Just trying to figure out how I got so lucky." He blinked a few times, then smiled in that slow, lazy way that never failed to knock me off balance. You ask, he said simply, and that was all there was to it. Spring rolled into summer like it had somewhere to be, and with it came a new version of my life, one where Sunday mornings were spent barefoot in Cam's kitchen, where our phones stayed untouched during dinners, and where I stopped second-guessing the moments that made me happy. Cam kept drawing. He didn't tell me right away, but one afternoon I came over to find his dining table covered in open sketchbooks and loose pages. I stopped in the doorway, watching him for a minute. He was so focused, tongue between his teeth, pencil smudges on his knuckles, sunlight pooling around him like he belonged in that light. "You're doing it again," I said. He looked up. "Doing what?" "Drawing you when I'm not looking," Cam grinned. "Correction, I used to draw you when you weren't looking. Now I just do it shamelessly." He handed me a page, this soft pencil sketch of me, from a few weeks back, mid-laugh, head tilted back on the park bench we'd claimed as ours. It was full of motion and affection, like someone had captured the feeling of a memory rather than just the shape. "You have a real shot at doing something with this," I said. "Maybe," he replied, "but I already got what I wanted out of it." "What's that?" He leaned in and kissed me, slow and sure. That summer, we went on our first trip together. Just a weekend up the coast. Nothing fancy. A little Airbnb with a porch and bad Wi-Fi and a view of the water. We drank too much wine, slept late, and talked about everything and nothing. One night, walking the beach barefoot after midnight, Cam stopped and looked out at the dark ocean. The moon lit up just enough to catch the side of his face. "You know what I used to do on New Year's?" he asked. "What?" "Write down 3 things I wanted to change. Usually dumb stuff, like drink more water, stop scrolling before bed. One year I even wrote, learn to parallel park without panic." Solid goal. He turned to me, his eyes soft. "But this year, I just wrote 1 thing." I already knew the answer, but I asked anyway. "What was it?" He took my hand. "Ask the guy with the sad eyes and the hoodie out, or make him do it first." I smiled. "Well, mission accomplished." "You know what's funny?" he added. "I think that resolution changed more than just my year." "How do you mean?" "It gave me this," he said, gesturing between us. "It gave me something real." I stood there, toes buried in cold sand, and felt the most impossible thing. Peace. No panic. No questions. Just us. We didn't kiss then. We didn't have to. The moment was already full. Later that year, on New Year's Eve, we sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, watching fireworks through the window. I asked him if he was making any resolutions for the new year. He leaned into me, head on my shoulder. "Just one," he said. "Yeah. Don't screw this up," I laughed. "That's mine too." And just before the clock struck midnight, he kissed me in the way he always did. No rush, no performance, just us. And I realized something that I hadn't quite been able to name until then. That wasn't just the year I made a resolution. It was the year the resolution made me. And he was sitting right beside me the whole time.